Hey, what's up, guys? You know I like the Osprey books. I like the dual series, and I also like these, where they basically they show weapon systems that are not the ones that you always think about. Everything from like the P-47 Thunderbolts versus the flak units in Normandy, and here you have very interesting, of course, the Eastern Front, the Panzerjager, right, the tank hunters versus the KV-1, probably the first, I guess, effective Soviet tank. Once again, you see the Germans. They hit quick. You could say that they weren't really logistically ready for what they were expecting, and you get a lot of that here. With basically in the first year and a half on the Eastern Front, the Panzerjager were almost useless when they ran into the T-34 is of course the famous T-34, but this one in particular, okay, knocking this thing out was not easy, and literally nothing they had was able to knock it out. So that's a 50 millimeter cannon, I think, on the front. But just going through the usual, it's the photos that add to all the things. You get these crazy useless multiple turret tanks. They look kind of cool though. Essentially, here's the KV-1. Interesting, the guy who designed it too. Also later, this guy and another guy, they were also involved in the Soviet nuclear weapon project. You know, for getting the bomb in 1949. So look at this thing. Very. I like the KV-1. Of course, I like the heavy monsters you get later, but you know me, I'm rooting for my mother's people. So this is the 37 millimeter cannon, which most of the Panzerjagers had. Okay, there was no self-propelled guns at this point. Your self-propelled guns are your assault guns, the Sturmgeschützes. They're made to support infantry. They're not made to fight tanks. Okay, but technologically, you get the nice schematics here. Of course, the 37 millimeter, the 50 millimeter, and of course the 75 millimeter Pack 40. This thing became a solution to a lot of problems. But the issues wasn't just the calibers. The issue was the ammo. You had two kinds of ammo that could really penetrate plate armor. Of course, the tungsten. You had the tungsten core ammo. Tungsten was kind of a rare metal though, and later you see where that becomes an issue. Speer wanted the tungsten for it was needed to make machinery, you know, for the factories. The other thing you have, of course, is the hollow charge, the heat shells. Essentially, your magnetic mine of your Panzerfaust head. It creates like a jet that punches through the armor in a real concentrated hole that drills through it and then releases the explosion inside. Very effective, but the early ones were not able to be shot out of anything with a really high velocity like a 37 millimeter. So they were actually given to the Sturmgeschützes with those short 75. Right, they were given to they worked best in low velocity howitzers. Essentially, like I said, the Stug 3 assault gun became a tank destroyer almost accidentally. The strategic situation. Really, you have so many Soviet tanks. The majority of them are not these KV-1s. There's the maps here. The bottom line is that when the KV-1s ran into the Germans, they caused havoc. You know, luckily they had, you know, for the Germans, a lot of them didn't have a lot of fuel or ammunition. But when they did, some of them didn't even get knocked out in the beginning anyway. So the tank destroyer guys were literally helpless. So you see the different calibers they come with. Of course, the 75 millimeter cannon is when you start to get the things, but there weren't a lot of them until I think 42, like the middle later 42. So the Germans pretty adaptable. Right? They pressed a lot of they captured so many Soviet weapons. The 76.2 gun, they pressed a lot of them. They upgraded them. They converted the ammo, and they started using these things as much as possible. Of course, one of the most brilliant things they did was to take the chassis of the now useless light tanks like the 38T and the Panzer II, and essentially put these captured Soviet guns and whatever 75 millimeter guns they had that were being built in increasing numbers on these chassis. Okay, pretty high in profile, not well protected, but these things really, this gave the Panzerjager new life. And also, this interesting thing too, that sort of like this warhead grenade, a heat round essentially converted for the 37 millimeter. Okay, right? Not very accurate, but when these things hit, these things penetrated the KV-1s. So these things actually were successful when they hit, but this is really what was needed. And there it is. It's called the I think the Stalagonite or something. Basically, this is the father of the Panzerfaust. Man, look at this picture, man. Look at this photo. This is not a staged photo. Okay, the Germans had to be really slick when they were having problems with these T-34s and KV-1s. They started digging. They started using lots of mines. They started making deep trenches for them to get stuck in, and they started using their flat guns instead of fighting aircraft. They started using more the 88s. And they started to turn the tide. Look at this, man. They had to get slick. They had to hide the 50 millimeter. Look at this photo, man. This thing was aimed at them. The first shot was gonna win. Oh shit, dude. Of course, the crazy, indestructible, but easily stuck and unreliable KV-2. Look at this monster. And look at look at this. One shot. One of these actually went through. The rest bounced off. So this is why the Germans are so nasty by 44 with everything they have, can penetrate any tank, because they had so many problems with these things. And they even surmise in here that Leningrad was probably not taken because these things put up a fierce resistance. But regardless, so let's go on through here. Look at that. I don't know, for some reason, of all the things here, I'm looking at that bayonet or that dagger. Look at that thing. I want one of those from there. Right, so here's a photo you'll see a lot. They lost a lot of these 37 millimeter cannons. The Russians, they like to run over them. They like to run over German troops. Okay? You say, oh, that's what, you know, you got to understand. That's fine. Running over German troops may have gotten satisfaction, but usually set them up to get taken out by his comrades nearby. And frequently they were. I mean, after the initial shock of these KV-1s for a while, the Germans started to have all kinds of ways of dealing with them. Look at this. The 1 KV required 13 hits from an 88 millimeter flak before it was stopped. And you could say, oh, it's German arrogance, right? They thought the Red Army was backwards, but they had, look at this monster. Yeah. That's a nice picture, man. And like the top blew off, the ammo blew up. So anyway, you got the aces. You get this guy, man. Of course, he died in the very end. Actually, he disappeared in Upper Silesia near the end here. So look at his accomplishments. Yeah. I mean, this guy was an anti-tank gunner. Finally got a good gun. And then finally got a self-propelled gun. Okay. Once they had the tungsten core rounds and later the heat rounds, then they were knocking out these, like he knocked out 7 of these things. So this was a monster at first, but the Germans quickly adapted, and then once they got the proper ammo and weapons, you know, when they got stuff like this, the tank became a big target. It was very slow. It's a cool Peter Dennis art. Yeah, this is like in the beginning, like. Hoorah! You know. And what's interesting here is that it got so bad early on that eventually the KV-1s, the infantry dealing with these were forced to be able to, the infantry started to, out of desperation, develop ways to knock these things out. Molotov cocktails, even mud on the sights, you know, using teller mines. A big thing was to use the mines. This tactics of desperation resulted in the creation of the Panzer Destruction Badge, right? The Panzerjager, the Tank Breaker. The Panzerjager was not eligible. Yeah, can you imagine? You should see some of these infantry guys. Some of them knocked out a lot of tanks by themselves. Okay, almost none of those guys survived the war, though. So you get a stud like that, never got to reproduce. Do you know what I'm saying? No. Anyway, just rounding it out. But like, great photo. Look at it. Like, Jesus Christ. Oops. Ivan, learn to drive. Nah, I can't. I can't. Listen, you know I'm biased, but I mean, like I always say, you gotta give the Red Army credit, man. These guys fought damn hard. So, and I like some guy said something here from the Russian side here. Hold on. Let's see, it's amazing. No, hold on. And from the Russian perspective, I like it. KV trainee Arseny Rodkin called it his uncle had been arrested in the purges and subsequently died in prison, which affected his attitude towards the regime he served. Rodkin later said that the Kremlin bastards come and go, but the motherland is forever. I was defending my country, not the Soviets. Mother Russia. Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying, the spirit of those people. You know, but the Germans have spirit too. It's just, they had. And the other thing too, right? The tungsten carbide. If Germany had possessed enough tungsten carbide, the threat posed by the KV heavy tanks and T-34s might have evaporated rather quickly, right? Prior to Barbarossa, Germany only had about 100 tons of tungsten ore annually. Okay, but this figure increased 800% after encounters with Soviet heavy tanks. Germany was totally dependent on foreign suppliers for access to tungsten ore. Okay, they received 90% of its tungsten from Spain and Portugal, right? Allied economic warfare. Oh, the Allies did not help. Right? Allied economic warfare successfully managed to pressure Spain and Portugal, right? I mean, Salazar is with the English, but Franco is like kind of in the middle here. To restrict tungsten exports to the Third Reich, just as demand rose exponentially. Right? And then Albert Speer, when he took over as Minister of Armaments, he saw the small reserves of tungsten were being rapidly consumed by the Panzerjager on the Eastern Front, leaving little for use of machine tools needed to produce the weapons. The machinery to make the weapons, that's a huge thing. Okay? So, very interesting, the development of it. So, anyways, to round it up, man, these photos, there's always the great photos. There's the other, and this is the other guy also. He actually lost his arm. He was in he was in the guys that went to finish off the Stalingrad dudes, but actually, they fought. They knocked out a lot of the tanks, the KV-1s, in that last 2 weeks, ironically, because they had the better ammo. And he also helped develop the atom bomb. Interesting. Anyway, almost done here. I'll leave it off. Right, the statistics. Look at this. Oh man, fucking, you know. Yeah, and yeah, that's what I just mentioned, right? The 50mm. While in its death throes, the trapped 6th Army managed to knock out a surprising number of KV-1 tanks in the final month of fighting. Right. Yeah, right. And then the duel was decided in favor of the Panzerjager once most German divisions received the pack guns, the 75, right? You know. And this is the other thing, aftermath. Right. Yeah, while Allied tankers would later complain about the Tiger scare on the Western Front, they still had potent guns that could deal with the occasional German heavy tank. Unlike the Panzerjager experience on the Eastern Front, you know, for almost 2 years, Allied troops were not regularly forced to fight enemy heavy tanks with flaming petrol bombs and hand-delivered anti-tank mines, right? The Panzerjaggers. Yeah, I seem to have a real focus on infantry taking out tanks. But luckily, you know, this is why they were so fearsome at the end. And also, look at this cool-ass thing before we round it out. The Hornice. Man, look at those things. These things could take out, like, any tank, like, almost 2 miles away. So, war never changes. Actually, it gets more gay later.